can you give us your top 5 most overvalued players in fantasy this year?
I would say Jonathan Taylor, number 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Caps Off by the Game Day. We got a very special guest today. We got Faraz from Upper Hand Fantasy, one of the best fantasy creators on social here in the building with us. What's up, Faraz? Welcome in.
What's up, man? I appreciate you guys having me.
Happy to have you here.
Dude,
This is Felipe and
Adam's been buzzing. So with Felipe.
Adam and Felipe are the fantasy boys.
The amount of content I take in from you, bro. When you said Josh Downs was a great fantasy pick, man. I had just done my dynasty draft and I had drafted him in like the late second round, I think, of my rookie dynasty draft. And I was like, man, this guy Faraz, he's always speaking to me.
You know, as an advisor on his board of trustees too for his dynasty team, that was really big for us.
Yeah.
I was following you like 2 years ago. I was previously at Overtime, and we started doing like one video together, and then Overtime kicked the can on it. And there's for some other reason, but you had way less followers then. And to see over a 2-year period, I think you were at one point 10,000 or something super small, and now you're over like 130,000 strictly for fantasy is impressive. It's awesome to see that
100%, man. And you know, I want to get more into the NFL stuff because, you know, over the years when you start, you know, you kind of like, well, you know, you get that imposter syndrome. You're like, do I really know what I'm talking about? But now after you do it, you know, year after year after year, you're like, all right, well, I think I could talk more about NFL. So I do want to branch out.
Were you did you start doing other sports before NFL?
No, man. It was just fantasy. When I first started, it was basically, what am I doing in my spare time? I want to put out content. What am I going to put content out about? And it was just like I was doing fantasy with my boys and all that. So I was like, all right, I can talk about it. Let's see how it goes.
Do you do fantasy baseball?
No, I don't. Just football.
Fantasy baseball's a bitch.
The right fantasy. Nobody
That's
wants
shit dedication.
No.
These guys both hate baseball. They're such not baseball fans, but we're the baseball.
No reason to play that.
Fantasy baseball is like a different animal.
Dude, that's every single day. It's changing it's a lot.
I would love to see the breakdown of like percentages of people that play fantasy and like what that percentage looks like. If it's like football, baseball, basketball, because it's got to be an overwhelming majority for football.
Baseball's big too,
for sure.
But yeah, it's got to be overwhelming for football.
I feel like basketball's decently big, but
no, that's got to be.
Sucks.
Hey, speaking of basketball, not congrats,
Hey,
but I'm
nice
sorry about your
transition.
loss.
Nice
congrats on Damian Lillard.
No. Congrats on a great season, Adam.
Thanks.
Adam.
Yeah.
Miami Heat, great season. Great season, overachieved.
Yep. Hey, I told you, I'm
How
at
do you
peace.
feel?
I'm at peace. Last night, I wasn't at peace. Last night, Amanda and I got into no names on this podcast. My girlfriend and I got into a major argument, and it wasn't an argument. It was just me saying, please shut up, because she's like, it's okay. You be happy you got here. And I'm like, you know what? No.
Let me be
matters.
emotional.
I'm upset.
But then you let her get into your head.
Yeah.
And now you're happy about it.
Well, it's because that's what happens. You scroll Twitter for like 2 hours, and you start seeing reasonable people come through, and then you listen to Spo's press
You
conference.
saw
and everything.
reasonable people on Twitter?
Yeah.
Damn.
Because you get to a
Shocking.
point where like you lose, and then you have like the big Heat accounts, and they're like, love this team, what a story, and everything. You're like, yeah, what a story. And then you start believing it.
you know what would have been a better fucking story?
Yeah, sure.
It's a good story.
But that only came around at like 2 a.m. So the first couple of hours was definitely
rough night.
Yeah, rough night. Rough night.
All right, let's bring it back around to Faraz for a second. What we were just talking about this a little bit off the pod. You obviously built up this page for yourself, you know, making awesome content. What about your content do you think, like, why should people listen to you, basically?
I don't know, man. That's a really good question. You know, I think I try to do my best to be as objective as possible. Like, I got my favorite players. I got the guys who I want to root for, who I want to do well because, you know, I think they're, like, for example, right, you have a bunch of rookies coming into the NFL, right? It's really hard to project rookies coming into the NFL.
Yeah.
However, you have your process. You refine it year after year. And I have guys, like, you know, who I like. I'll give you an example. Dwayne McBride out of, you know, on the Vikings right now, right? He was like my 6th ranked running back going into the NFL, but then he gets drafted in the 7th round. Now, am I going to continue to be a Dwayne McBride stan? I don't think that's smart, right? Because the chances that a running back, you know, does his thing, you know, even day 3, let alone round 7, is not high, right? So I'm gonna change my thought process. Not think
things
that,
adjust.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, you know, he does have a little bit of an opportunity now, so I am rooting for him. Dalvin Cook got released, right? So, but you know, I try to stay as objective as possible, I think.
Yeah. Same.
No, we do
I'm
not
not.
stay objective. We
I'll be honest,
we
like-
are subjective on this podcast for sure.
We are super
Well,
biased.
but you also mentioned him, Dwayne McBride, but I feel like the Vikings probably wouldn't have or knew they were probably going to release Dalvin or look for a trade. So it was almost a value play for them at that point at the 7th round.
I hope so. You know, he in particular hasn't been participating in the OTAs. He's been a little hurt and stuff like that. But I do think that he has a chance. Like, I am a little bit biased, right? Is Alexander Madison going to be the guy? Right, I think there are questions around that. Like, I think there's a possibility. He's done very well when Dalvin Cook missed games in the past, but at the end of the day, it's like there's going to be opportunity for a couple of these.
Yeah,
guys on the
totally.
roster.
I do think he's going to be he's going to have the opportunity to be the guy.
100%. And the head coach has already endorsed him to be a 3-down guy. He has to just make sure that he doesn't let any other running backs, compete.
Yep.
What? Yeah, go.
I was gonna say, going back to the content, and obviously you're a big fantasy player yourself. But what made you get into the content space for fantasy? Like, what made you want to just start creating?
I've always been somebody who wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think that's when it started, and I didn't really know how to get started at all. Like, I didn't really have much direction from anywhere around me. And then I'm not gonna lie, like Gary V, when he started putting stuff out, I read his book, Crush It.
Yeah, great book.
And then I started listening to a lot of his content, and he really. Like, I started just following everything he did. This was like, it's probably 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I just started getting into it. And then he was, like I mentioned earlier, I knew I wanted to put out content. I just didn't know what I wanted to put content in about. And it was just a matter of, like, what am I doing in my spare time?
Yeah, niching it
and that's
down.
what I started. So that's really what got it started, to be honest with you. And, a lot of the stuff that he put out was around mindset stuff, like just like, so like that helped me out to start. And then from there, obviously there's been a lot of other, prolific content creators and entrepreneurs putting out content. So all that kind of stuff, helped me kind of guide my process for the most part.
I've seen that y'all have, there's the Upper Hand Fantasy main page, and I've noticed recently that you guys are breaking out into like cities, or like team based, right?
Yeah.
How can you explain that?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to like just create communities, because we realize that not everyone plays fantasy. You can love the NFL, you can love your team, but you might not play fantasy. So we're trying to, create communities and create spaces for those people, for those fans, to just like have a space where they can, talk about their team. And I want to have dedicated people. And so far we have about 10 pages right now for different teams where, like, let's try to create a community. Let's try to, like, do this like the kind of similar way that we've done it.
Right.
Because I think we fostered a nice little community at Upper Hand, and now let's try to foster that same thing for particular fan bases.
How many people you work with?
Well, we have about 10 people right now, each of them, having a particular team that they're kind of focused on, and then I have a graphic design team, and we have a video editing team. I think for social, I think that's like the main thing. Always,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Are you boss
crazy.
man?
What's
Are
that?
you the boss man?
Yeah, I would say so.
How crazy is it
fucking
to
lit,
see
man.
I was like, how crazy is it to see that grow from when it was just you saying, fuck it, I'm just going to make some content about this, now having like a team of people that you manage and everything. That's gotta be
It's
nuts.
crazy. I don't really stop to smell the roses that often, but like I think, because we're just getting started at the same time,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's just like, you have these goals, these huge goals, and you want to get there. So we're just trying to build it, as much as we can. And I'm not gonna lie, like, I still have a day job. Like, I still have. Now I'm lucky that I finagle my way into not having to work so many hours on that day job, because that's just holding down me and my family. But at the end of the day, like, that's gonna be I'm gonna eventually quit that, right? It's like that standard story of like that side hustle, but that side hustle has really become a hustle that I'm doing 60-70 hours a week. That ends up being my main thing.
That's no side hustle. That's a fucking
That is
hustle
the
and a half.
hustle, yeah.
Like,
It's the hustle right now, but at the end of the day, it's like, eventually, we want to get to the point where, like, I don't have to worry about that other thing.
Oh, that's fire.
That's
Hey,
crazy. Good
shout
for
out
you.
to anybody
Yeah.
out there that just wants to start making content, bro. Like, that's the way
just
right there.
fucking do it.
Yeah.
That's lit.
Yeah.
That's sick.
And Gary Vee is a good person to follow, bro. Crush
He
is a
is.
great book.
I also think it's
Great
just
book,
fun.
man.
Like, there's so much of an ego involved with it because you're afraid of judgment and everything.
the
And like,
thing.
you're making your content right now and starting up multiple accounts and talking about how to grow in sports media. So I commend you. That's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
sick.
I love it. And I do want to help people. So, like, that is one of the most rewarding things about it. Like, a lot of people reach out and talk and ask me about that particular thing. Not necessarily about fantasy questions, but, how do I get started, that sort of thing. And I do have a lot of advice that I would give.
Yeah.
So if anybody, you can always reach out to me. You know what I mean? Like just DM me, hit me up.
That's awesome.
All right,
Wholesome as fuck.
Let's talk about the fantasy advice.
Let's do it.
I mean, we have a whole bunch of topics we wrote down. I guess we'll just rattle through them.
Let's do it.
The first one we were talking about, because there's been some just conversation about in the office, is you can never prepare too early for who is going to be the first overall pick in fantasy this year.
Adam, the never prepare too early is because Adam's already ripped 100 fucking mock drafts, and it's June 12th.
We're about like 17 a day.
It's one of the most fun parts of it, though.
I mean,
Yeah,
one
preparing.
Fantasy Pros dropped an app to do it. I mean, we're talking right before bed. It's just like, let me just run one more. Let me check out the 3 spot.
Bro, I don't think I've actually, I've played fantasy since middle school. I don't think I've ever done a mock
I did a mock draft once.
so much fun.
The morning of a draft. I've
All
done
right,
mock
well,
draft.
y'all are the two extremes because mock drafts are definitely fun. They're normal, but you do way too much. So.
Yeah.
Actually, I did one for my first ever dynasty year was this year. And so, like, our dynasty draft. And so I had Felipe. I'm like, all right, like, I'm in the 2 spot. Like, how do I do this?
It's never too early to
I did that one mock.
All right. Well, anyway.
All right, Matan.
I asked.
I do want to say though, like if you like doing mock drafts this early, like you should do best ball drafts, like on whatever platform you choose. Like best ball, because if you draft so much, that probably means that you're pretty good at it and you can win some money doing it. So like I would suggest best ball.
Hey, you heard what he said? You heard what he said?
Never too early to start.
Yeah, now you got to pay him
prepping.
for business
Now,
advice, bro.
seriously.
All right. Well, who is going to be the first overall draft pick in fantasy this year?
I think it's between a couple guys. I think Justin Jefferson is probably the consensus number 1 overall pick. I think Christian McCaffrey's right there too. Me personally, who am I? I'm picking Justin Jefferson personally,
Yeah.
just because I think that when you have that number 1 pick, you want upside obviously, but you want like a surefire thing, right? You don't want to take too many risks if you have the number 1 pick because you're not picking until the end of the second round, right? If you're doing a snake draft, right? So Justin Jefferson for me probably is the number 1. I think that's consensus right now too.
Yeah.
But isn't there risk baked into that in the sense that you're drafting him at the ceiling, which I get is the best ceiling that you could possibly have? And if I was picking first overall, I'd probably do the exact same thing. But do you find that in these types of drafts, specifically this year, you'd rather almost be at that back end because there's guys like the Jamar Chases that could potentially fall, Cooper Kupps, Tyreek Hills, where they have the potential to be a wide receiver 1? Or would you rather be in the space where it's like, I want Justin Jefferson 1 overall, and I'd rather be at that early
No, I'm with you
mark.
actually. I'd rather try to get 2 studs, right? Like if I'm picking like later in the first round, there's a good chance that a stud is going to fall to you, and then you can get another stud at the beginning of the second round. That's what I prefer, because when you get to the 2-3 turn, like at the end of the second round, early third round, like you're going to get good players, but you're going to have a little bit of a tougher decision to make. It's a lot easier to make a decision at the end of the first, early second.
Yeah.
I was actually, because we were talking about this yesterday, how a lot of drafts now, like especially one you do with all the same guys every year, like you basically, instead of having a competition decide the exact draft order, that's the order of how you get to pick your draft spot.
Right.
What would you say in a 10-man and a 12-man league are like the 2 best positions to draft in each draft? Because I have no fucking clue, like at all. I feel like in the middle or the late first round, but I still have no idea. Like,
Or even at range, at least, even like a couple spots.
I like towards the end of the first.
Yep.
I like between like let's say you're in the 10-man league. I think a lot of people are. I think the standard is like 12, but like
10 or
let's be
12,
honest. Like, do you have that many friends? Like it's between.
damn, what'd you say about me?
Let's say it's a 10-man league. I think I want to be somewhere between like 7 and 10, like somewhere there, because then you're gonna get a pretty good player at the end of the. At the beginning of the second round also, right? If I'm in a 12-man league, I probably want between like 10 and 12. Just because like that's a little bit of a sweet spot.
Whatever it is, that last 3
There
in
is
the
a
first
good
round.
chance, like for example, like you can get a guy like, Tony Pollard. Like there is a little bit of unknown, like are they gonna sign another early down back to complement him? As of right now, it's Pollard's show. So it's like he has a chance to be a top 5 running back. You can get him at the end of the turn, combine him with like a AJ Brown or a CD Lamb or someone like that. Maybe someone else who was slated to go a little bit earlier falls to you, right? So that is a little bit like you said. You draft Justin Jefferson 101. It's like, all right, well now you're at the mercy of your league mates to hope that one of these studs fall to you, right?
Yeah. But I'm under the impression that this is, and I said this to you yesterday, this is the first year that fantasy has actually shifted in the sense that you should go wide receiver, even if you're between the 7 to 12 range, because we know that there's less risk with wide receivers. We know the upside is there. We know that they can carry you through a fantasy season. And with running backs, they're easily replaceable. And we've seen that as the market has dwindled down. So would you say that this is really the first year that fantasy players should probably look at that back end and be like, you know what, I'm going to go a Cooper Kupp, a Tyreek, And then maybe on the back end go with Stephon Diggs and A.J. Brown, a CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams. Like, is this the first year that fantasy has shifted towards wide receiver, or maybe even zero running back strategy?
Yeah, and I think there's a reason for that. And I think a lot of people might look at it as what you said in terms of like, oh, the wide receivers are more stable. They don't get injured as often. However, we also have to think about running backs and what they are now, right? We don't have too many running backs. There are these bell cow every down, catching 80 balls, and on top of that, 350 rushing attempts, right? Like that's not happening all the time. Like you have just a couple of guys doing that, right? So I think because of that, if there were those type of backs and there was like a handful of them, I think you would see them going in the top 5.
Yeah. Are there any running backs that should go in the top 5?
I think so. I mean, I think Christian McCaffrey, right, should be there. I totally understand like the worry about the injuries. Like he was my 101 last year.
Yeah.
And I got so much shit for it. You know what I'm saying?
Fuck him.
He was awesome.
People were just like,
Yeah.
But hey, like it worked out, right? He got to San Francisco. It still worked out. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel like there are a few guys that can go. CMC is number 1. And, you can make an argument for a guy like Bijan maybe. Just because of what his role is going to be in the NFL.
What about Saquon Barkley?
Saquon Barkley is up there too. So there's only a handful of guys that are going to be every down.
I don't even think
That's the
running
thing.
back.
That's why it's scary because heading into last year?
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor
he was
that
the number
dude.
1.
Yeah.
Everyone said he was
Like,
the one.
when do you know, bro? And you're talking about a guy that's young as hell coming off of his rookie year, right? I believe so. He's going into his second year last year.
Where he led the league
And
in
so,
rushing.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking dynasty or you're talking redraft, like this is that dude, and you're not really worried about injuries. Doesn't really have that history, like, and then he goes out and puts out a dud year.
I'll tell you, and I think people get enamored by what a player did the year before, but you really have to look at how he got those points and the opportunity that he had. When you're looking at a running back and you're taking him number 1 overall and he doesn't catch passes and he doesn't have the upside to catch 70 balls, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, what
You
about
can't
like
do it.
Josh Jacobs, who led the league in rushing last year?
Similar thing. However, Josh Jacobs was at least somewhat involved in the passing game, right? I think he caught like 60 balls last year. He had, something like 70, 80 targets. So that's okay, I think. And the fact that he's going into this year with the same coach, another quarterback who is not a scrambler, who will likely dump it down instead of running it. That's what I'm worried about JT this year, right? With Anthony Richardson coming in now,
he can run the ball.
there's a little bit of a concern with JT. He's right now consensus top 5 running back off the board, and I personally don't have him there.
Got him in Dynasty. Fuck. All right.
It's crazy. The fantasy sweet spots right now are so interesting because I keep seeing with wide receivers, they're going so early, people want to take them, but you're going to have these guys like a fucking Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard in the middle of the second round that are going to be guys that a couple years ago would have probably under these same opportunities been a top 5 pick. It's just wild to me how fantasy has shifted.
We on the Caps Off podcast do a lot of rankings. So I want to ask you to give us a couple of rankings.
Okay.
So the 2 rankings of lists I have, can you give us your top 5 most overvalued players in fantasy this year?
Oh, he's got that shit cooked up already. Look at that.
I know we gave this to you off the pod so you could prepare a little bit.
I would say Jonathan Taylor number 1.
Overvalued? JT's overvalued.
right now. And listen, this is from a redraft 2023 perspective, not necessarily Dynasty. I think I still have him as like a top 3 running back in Dynasty now.
Fuck yeah.
So don't worry.
Do you work standardly in PPR, half PPR?
Yeah, I'm mostly.
If you're standard,
if you
you're
go standard, you can
fucking-
go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Gio was back there yesterday.
2007.
Agreed. By the way, we all agree with you.
Gio was just like a lot of people play standard. Me and
No
Felipe were
one.
like, bro, if you play standard, you should probably dolphin dive. I mean, what are we doing? No
And,
one's doing
if you go half PPR, like I get it, like just make the
If you're
jump.
doing half
Just-
PPR, you're just trying to be cool.
Yeah, just
you're
like,
just
you know,
trying
you
to
try to be
offer it.
different, bro.
Yeah,
My
fuck
fantasy-
off. Like,
You try to be different.
like, I can't
It's so
compute that
interesting.
shit
We
in my
talked
head.
about this last
I
season.
kinda play half
I've
PPR.
only ever played half PPR, like since I was 13. Like we
That's
always
wild.
played half PPR.
Well,
I'm full.
And I've been in multiple leagues. It might be an East Coast thing. I don't know.
If you played half PPR that long ago, that means that like you guys were on the button. Yeah.
Yeah,
for
we've been
sure.
doing it forever. I don't know.
Same. That's all
yeah.
I play is half PPR.
But Jonathan Taylor, man, like, excuse me. I mean, he was like, he had his amazing season last year. And by the way, me thinking that he's overrated this year isn't because of the, quote unquote bad season he had last year or the injuries he had. I don't care about any of that. What I'm thinking is that he's being drafted middle of the first round right now, maybe a little bit later than that, but definitely in the first round. But he's not going to be catching the passes. Now he has Anthony Richardson coming in. Anthony Richardson is going to be taking a ton of those goal line carries away, right? Look what Jalen Hurts is doing right now. And then Anthony Richardson is Cam Newton size, right?
Yeah.
He is going to be taking a lot of those goal line carries away. How good is the offense going to be? And all of those dump offs that could be going JT's way in the pass game, especially if you're playing PPR, you care about that stuff. You know, Anthony Richardson's going to just tuck it and run it, right? In those situations, we don't see scramblers, you know, checking it down as often as pocket quarterbacks. So I'm really concerned with Jonathan Taylor right now.
All right. Number
So
two.
that's number one. Number two is Breece Hall. Another one of my dynasty favorites. You know,
Dynasty.
Dynasty.
He's probably my RB2 in dynasty right now. Okay.
Look at that.
I'm only worried about him this year because he's coming off the ACL injury.
Right.
That's my only concern with him. There's been two running backs since 2000, I think. Yeah, since 2000 that have come back from an ACL and paid off at the price that you paid for him in fantasy leagues, and that has been
Adrian
Peterson, and you guys know the other one?
Coming off an ACL and
Coming off
paid off?
ACL and killed it.
Saquon did.
Jamal Charles.
Jamal.
What
I
a
thought Felipe
goat.
was
I
going to
should've
get
done
that.
that one, yeah.
That's
Saquon Barkley, remember he came back, but then he had that high ankle sprain
Yeah.
in the second
He got
or
hurt
third
again.
game of the
Yep.
season. And, you know, people might want to look at that and say that wasn't related, but, like, listen. Like,
he was not
you
healthy.
guys
You overcompensate.
You
begin to
overcompensate, right? Do you
yeah.
guys remember, like, the size of his legs? Like, you can see one was clearly bigger than the other. One was Quadzilla and one wasn't, right? So, you know, you can kind of tell that. Okay, that's my concern with Breece Hall. He's going off as the RB11 off the board right now, 2-3 turn. That's where he's going. That's a little bit too high for me. I have him a little bit lower. Let's see. Travis Etienne is number 3. Kenneth Walker is number 4.
It's all running backs.
Wow.
It's all running backs right now. Do I have? I have a wide receiver for
Okay.
you. Don't worry. Just because I have another.
I was
guy
worried.
there. No, don't worry. Travis Etienne. Here's the thing, right? Those two guys, their teams just drafted a running back
Yep.
on day 2 of the NFL draft.
Yeah, fuck that.
You know, Zach Charbonnet going to Seattle. You have Tank Bigsby going to Jacksonville now.
Tank
So
Bigsby.
it's a situation
Sick
where
football,
these
man.
guys, like Travis Etienne had an every down role last year.
Yeah.
And he still didn't come through with an amazing fantasy season. He was good, but he didn't stand out, right?
Yeah, I feel like when they traded James Robinson, he was solid, but not like as good as everyone thought he was going to be.
He should have been
He had
better.
games, but definitely wasn't as
And
consistent.
that big playability was there, right? He was not involved in the passing game at all. I think he averaged like 3 targets a game, which is nothing for somebody coming out of Clemson who was like considered,
Especially from
pass
Trevor
catching
one of
Lawrence.
the best
Yeah.
pass catching backs. And it turns out that when you really look back, you know, his route tree wasn't diversified at all. He was just catching a bunch of dump offs. So that should have been. And I actually made that mistake as an analyst a couple of years ago when he was coming out. I'm like, this guy's a really good pass catcher, but like that's something that, you know, I'm starting to look into now, put that into my process. But that's another thing. Now Zach Charbonnet coming into
Yeah, I'm curious with
Seattle
Kenneth
now.
Walker.
That's going to be an interesting situation. Like, what does that turn into? Is it a 50-50 split? Is it a 65-35 split? You know, Kenneth Walker obviously should get the benefit of the doubt, right? He killed it last year. But at the end of the day, they want to deploy a 2-back system. Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. Who's going to get the goal line carries, right? Zach Charbonnet is a big back also.
Right.
Also, Kenneth Walker isn't catching passes a ton. That was never in his profile.
Right.
I feel like ever since Marshawn Lynch too, you've seen this with Seattle, where they've got a stud running back and he's there for like a year or two, he's really good. And the next guy
No
up, they just keep
team-
cycling through it.
I saw a stat that no team in the last like 10 years has drafted more running backs than the Seattle Seahawks.
Really?
Almost all of them they've drafted too have been good.
I'm
by the
curious
way.
though with the
Like,
Kenneth Walker thing. Don't you think his like this overvalued? Like it's now baked into his ADP because he
It's not.
was.
It's
You don't
not.
think?
He's
going in like the 4th now.
He's being taken as the RB15, which is
Oh,
like a
then
high-end
maybe,
RB2. Like, I just kind of feel like his where he's going to end up is like the RB18 range, like a mid RB2 maybe.
Yeah.
But that's given, like, that's if it's going to be a little bit higher than a 50-50. What if it's a
Yeah.
50-50? They also drafted a Georgia running back,
Kenny McIntosh, shout out University School.
Oh,
Who
they
is
got
a-
McIntosh too.
Went to my school. Was on the basketball team as well.
Everyone.
Nice.
Amazing pass catcher. Okay. And Pete Carroll came out and said, you know, Pete Carroll, like, he loves his players, right? He talks great about all his players. But he said, you know, this guy could have been drafted in the 3rd, 4th round. And I actually agree with him because
he should have
was
been.
one of the best pass catching running backs in this draft class. So does he get a role on 3rd downs now? Now, is this a three-man backfield? I'm a little concerned about that. Okay. Sorry.
Who's the wide receiver?
George Pickens.
Ooh.
I'm
deep
kind
cut.
of with that.
George Pickens is being drafted ahead of Deontay Johnson right now, or right around him, which
He
is
made one catch.
And you think Johnson?
He made that one catch.
Deontay
That one,
Johnson.
he's made a couple.
is
catches.
an alpha wide receiver just kind of like he didn't have a good year last year. He scored 0 touchdowns. When you have 150 targets, and you score 0 touchdowns.
0 touchdowns?
0 touchdowns.
Holy
last year.
shit!
Which is why he had such a bad fantasy season. But we have to recognize that as such an outlier year. Like those touchdowns are going to bounce back. Do you remember Cole? You remember Cole Kmet the year before, where he scored 0 touchdowns on like 100 targets.
God.
Yeah, and then he started reeling him in last year.
Touchdown monster.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen with
Positive
Deontay.
regression.
If Kenny Pickett takes a step forward now,
he will.
He's
I think
26.
Deontay.
Ever
he's
since the
gonna do
bye
his
last
thing.
year, Kenny was looking good too. I actually
Yeah.
feel like he's gonna have a nice.
So you're taking Deontay Johnson over George Pickens?
It's not even close.
Wow.
Yeah, but we like the Pickett to Pickens connection. You know, the names.
Pick it to Pickens.
I
That's a
get
good
it.
point.
Also didn't realize Deontay Johnson's only
Announcers are
26.
gonna love that one.
Yeah, come
Still
on,
super
bro.
young.
He is one of the best route runners, best separators in the league. Still, I think he's just not getting the respect that he deserves. And if we were to transition into like an undervalued player,
I wanna get-
Deontay Johnson is going around that range with a George Pickens, where he's being drafted as outside the top 36, which means that he's like a flex-worthy player. Like, nah, dude, he has the upside
he's
of
wide
being
receiver.
a solid wide receiver too, potentially.
So who are your top 5 undervalued fantasy players this year?
I just talked about Deontay, right? So let's go him.
fantasy so
Okay,
bad
Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon going off the
I
board
feel
as
a
an
lot of people are over.
RB16.
Yeah.
Listen, I understand that he's going through his off the field issues right now. I get it. But how often do these off the field legal issues happen and take place that same year? It never happens. We saw it with Alvin Kamara. We saw it with a bunch of players. And the Bengals knew about this situation before the draft. And they decided not to worry about it. They drafted Chase Brown in the 5th round, which means that they weren't worried about it. If they're going to wait until the 5th round just to see if a random running back is going to be there, that means they're not worried. So if they're not worried, I'm not worried. So Joe Mixon is going to be the guy. They got rid of Samaje Perine. He's gone.
Yep.
Right? He was on the field on 3rd downs, on passing downs. So Joe Mixon actually has a chance of being an every down back for the first time in his career.
Yeah.
On a great offense.
I also
Yeah.
think people are
Improved offensive line.
overreacting to that one game where he had a 4 touchdown game last year. So people are overreacting 5 touchdown where people are like, that kind of affected his points. I also think when you look at it, I think the Bengals can cut him next year for like close to nothing.
Yeah.
So and with Joe Burrow's contract coming up, with probably T. Higgins, Jamar Chase as well, all these guys are going to need a contract. Like I could see the Bengals completely just working this man into oblivion.
As they should. And, there's been a lot of conversation around like running back contracts and what they're worth and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Like a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but I'm on the train of like, if I'm an NFL team, I will use your rookie contract up.
And
You're
then
done.
And see it.
And then I'm going to draft another running back in the
Absolutely.
second round next year.
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
Unless you're an
It
absolute
is.
difference maker like a Christian McCaffrey, it's not going to be
Sure.
that much of a.
Yeah, because he's catching like
discrepancy.
80 balls on top of his 250 rushes, right? So that is a different story.
But otherwise, it's really not that big of a discrepancy.
If you're you're quote unquote replaceable,
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey is not. Saquon might not be. Guys like that who are,
Unicorns, like
you know what I mean?
I
So
still don't want to pay him, but yeah.
I get. I get.
So if you drafted Joe Mixon, are you drafting Chase Brown as a handcuff? Like
not
later?
necessarily, there's different schools of thought on whether you draft a handcuff or not of the player that you drafted.
Yeah.
I am personally not. I like to draft the handcuff of
someone
other
else,
players,
yeah.
of other
Teams,
other
then you got
starters on
trade
other
value.
teams
Yeah.
because the upside of my team just got way bigger. So if Joe Mixon got hurt, I can put Chase Brown into lineup. Chances are he's not going to perform as well as Joe Mixon. So actually, my floor just got lower. However, let's say I draft like Dwayne McBride. Like let's say Dwayne McBride is the handcuff, like going into the season, and I draft Joe Mixon. But instead of getting Chase Brown at the end of my draft, I draft Dwayne McBride, assuming that we think that he's the handcuff. Now you got an injury to Madison, and now you're ceiling because now you get to start Joe Mixon and Dwayne
facts,
McBride.
facts.
True.
There's not like that. Also, going back to the running backs, there's not that many handcuffs that you could pinpoint
Agreed.
that are like, you know what, this guy goes down, you're coming right in.
Which
Like
is
this-
why I never draft him.
Yeah.
Unless I know for sure. Like for example, Dalvin Cook and Madison.
I would say Madison's the only one.
You
I can
knew
really
that
think of.
Madison was going to be
Zeke,
the
Tony
guy.
Pollard.
Zeke Pollard, right? But Pollard had some standalone value,
Yeah,
so he was worth it, right? AJ Dillon, a little bit of standalone value. So guys like that,
Jamal
there are
Williams.
those guys, right? Exactly.
What's Charbonnet's standalone value?
I think, man,
And,
it's
and what's
tough
his
to say.
potential as
Felipe
if Walker
loves
gets hurt?
Charbonnet.
It's tough to
drafted
say, man. I think to start the season, I think he's only going to be like, maybe 8 to 10 carries to start the year, and then maybe a couple catches. So I think he's like a flex play at best to start the year. Now, if Kenneth Walker gets hurt,
Yeah.
he has RB1 potential.
Yeah.
Who are the rest of the undervalued players?
All right, let's go.
Let's
go. Maybe
we got Mixon.
Maybe try not to get phone calls during this thing. All right, so
Mixon.
we got a few guys. I'm going to try to switch it up between wide receivers because I have a bunch here. I'm going to start with David Montgomery as being undervalued right now. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he has RB1 potential this year, no doubt about it. However, do you guys remember how the Lions used Jamal Williams last year?
Yeah.
On early downs, he was their main guy
line.
at the goal line, led the league in touchdowns. I don't necessarily think Montgomery will have the same luck Jamal Williams had last year.
Back, though.
He's a better running back than Jamal Williams.
He is,
Yes.
and that's really.
we were saying that, people getting pissed off about that.
I know, and it's weird, and he's like way better. Like he's not just better; he's just way better than him.
Yeah.
And as long as he can stay healthy, he's going to do what Jamal Williams did and more. And Jamal Williams is a terrible pass catcher. I think David Montgomery is going to be running more routes on early downs. If Jahmyr Gibbs is on or off the field, it doesn't matter, and he has a chance of getting 45 receptions this year, along with 225 rushes, 200, maybe 250, depending on how they use Gibbs. Like, are they going to use Gibbs 10 to 15
love that.
carries
Yeah, maybe
a
he's
game?
the goal line guy.
Maybe and I can totally see David Montgomery being the goal line.
What's
guy.
his
So
ADP? What's his range?
He's being
right
drafted as an RB28.
Wow.
now? The running backs in
I
the
gotta
3 to
take
4
notes,
range
man.
is like the sweet spot.
So
this year.
I'll tell you, just to get off topic, because I'm sure you love that. RB26, RB27, and RB28 is Rashad White, James Conner, and David Montgomery.
That's disrespectful.
3 guys who are going to catch a lot of balls this year, and I think that's like a little bit of a sweet spot. So, like you were saying earlier, if you go wide receiver early, I think these 3 guys are kind of sweet spot of like a, I guess you call it like the.
I would
the
never
I'm
second
thought
gonna,
of
I'm gonna need to listen back to this episode when it comes
times,
draft
bro.
season, because I'm gonna need to remember that.
Your league mates, don't pass this one to your friends though. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
There's
bro,
a
they
lot
should
of
listen to the
guys.
podcast. What do you
I'm
mean?
even looking.
Hell no, I hope they don't listen to this one.
I'm looking at Fantasy
Facts.
Pros right now and just looking at their RB20 to 28 range, and it's guys like Dalvin, who obviously we don't know where he's going, but James Conner, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Rashad White, Jamal Williams. You got Kamara there. He's probably gonna get suspended for 4 games, 5 games,
Right.
knowing what's gonna happen. But
Kendrick Miller season, bro.
okay, but still, Alvin Kamara's still Alvin Kamara. Towards back, it wasn't as prolific, but he's still.
I
There's
just drafted
value
Miller,
there.
so I'm high on him. Relax, bro. Relax.
There's
Still a value though. I
Khalil
agree.
Herbert. They
agree.
didn't. Who else do they have in Chicago?
They just drafted Roshan Johnson.
True.
So
Dog, shout out Texas.
yeah,
Shout out
he's-
Texas, bro. Fuck yeah.
Facts.
Yeah, I think Roshan can potentially make it. I think Khalil Herbert's really good.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a real possibility Roshan takes over that backfield completely. I think it'll be a 2-man show between those 2 guys. They also have what's his name, Deontay Foreman too.
Yeah.
Not sure, he might be the 3rd man out, even though he's a decent running back. I don't think he'll be in the rotation.
Who else you got?
Okay, let's see. We got I mentioned those running backs. Chris Godwin. Listen, I know that
like
the
Godwin.
Bucs offense right now is gross, right? You got
Thank
Baker
you.
Mayfield potentially starting there. However,
I said that yesterday, and they were all like, "No, they're still good. You just replace Baker with Tom Brady with Baker."
I don't think they're that bad.
here's the thing, right? Wide receiver 28 off the board. Chris Godwin is a better wide receiver than that.
So much
He's
better.
gonna-
28?
28.
That's
right now.
crazy.
So here's the thing. Do you guys remember last year? No one wanted to draft DK Metcalf. No one wanted to draft Tyler Lockett.
Because of
Why?
Geno,
Because
yeah.
Geno Smith was going to be the quarterback, right? That didn't really work out, right? DK Metcalf and Lockett were high in wide receiver 2s, low in wide receiver 1s all year long. So similar situation. I understand the situation isn't as good. There could be some inconsistencies, but you got to realize the talent's going to be there. And Chris Godwin is going to be a year removed from that ACL injury too. He did what he did last year, the year after an ACL injury. So 2 years after, he already talked about it, that how he feels now. He feels way better.
What about Mike Evans?
I think Mike Evans is wide receiver 34 off the board right now.
Yeah.
Come on, you know what I mean?
love this
His
sport.
over under right now. I just saw that the yearly prop on him is under 1,000 yards, and what do we know?
happened.
Death taxes and Mike
Like
Evans
a
going
1,000
up
yards.
1,000
Facts.
right? So I think he's totally undervalued right now.
Also the same shit. At the
Hey,
same,
man,
literally all
Chicago
4 of you
is
said the
thrown
same.
around.
He's done it every fucking year in the league.
Yeah, it's
it, man.
crazy.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I think I nailed 5.
That's a
for
great
you
list.
guys.
There we go.
Yeah,
That's
that's
nice.
perfect.
How do you feel about Brandon Ayuk? Just curious, right?
He's on the list.
Hell yeah.
He's on the
Undervalued?
list. He's on the list.
That's what I'm
Undervalued.
telling everyone.
I could have mentioned him. He's going off the board as a wide receiver 29 right now. So he's one of my favorite wide receivers who hasn't reached his potential. So if you're looking for a buy in dynasty, but a lot of people are high on Ayuk, but you might be able to get the guy who can give you Ayuk for a little cheaper. He's somebody who can emerge as a high-end wide receiver too at some point in his career. I kind of, you know what I look at it? I kind of compare him to Stephon Diggs, where before he came to Buffalo, right? He has that same skill set in terms of route running separation. It's just a matter of give him the volume.
Right. Brandon Ayuk is Stephon Diggs. Fuck yeah. I'm a big Niner fan. I'm very high on Brandon Ayuk, so I was kind of curious.
Here's an interesting question. What player has been impacted the most this offseason? Like which player,
positive or negative?
What player or players have been basically have made the biggest shift? Some sort of change has happened around them, whether it's for the team, whether it's for themselves, that they're either going to like, you know, their stock is going to go ridiculously up or crazy down.
Well, I already talked about Kenneth Walker and
Travis
Etienne, right? Those two guys stock down, obviously, because of the players that they drafted. Tyler Algier is another one, right? You know, a lot of people were high on him. I was high on him coming into the league, but you got to understand that if you're a day 3 running back, you're replaceable because of the contract you have. So they drafted Bijan, and I'm somebody who believes that Bijan Robinson is going to be the every down back. Yeah. Like Tyler Algier is going to get his opportunity, but it's not going to be anywhere close to being able to dent someone like Bijan's fantasy value, for example, right? Garrett Wilson, right? You know, getting Aaron Rodgers.
About that.
You know, that's going to be huge for him, right? Like he has the chance of finishing as a wide receiver 1 this year. He was a wide receiver 1 last year, when in games that Zach Wilson didn't start. So imagine what Rodgers is going to do for him, right? So stock up on him. Lamar Jackson, you know,
God bless.
He never had weapons, man. He had Hollywood Brown, he had Mark Andrews, and now, you know, he gets an offensive coordinator who's going to allow him to pass the ball. He's going to get an offensive coordinator that's going to allow him to shift protection. Like his old offensive coordinator wouldn't allow him to shift protection or call audibles. Like, are you kidding me?
Which is like standard, at least protection.
I didn't know that.
Come on. Like, it's unbelievable. So he's a pass, you know, this Todd Monken we're talking about here, who's a pass-first guy, has always been a pass-first guy. And now they just drafted Zay Flowers. They added OBJ. Rashad Bateman's there. Mark Andrews. You know, J.K. Dobbins, you know, somebody I'm really into this year. Also, because he's coming off that ACL injury, 2 years removed from that multi-ligament injury now, I'm really high on him. I also think Gus Edwards isn't going to be that big of a thing as he was before. I digress. I tend to do that. But Lamar Jackson, I think, you know, has all the weapons around him now, where I think that he can even take a bigger step forward. The rushing is going to be there, I think. However, I think this is a season where you see his pass yards go way up.
Totally. I definitely agree with that.
You mentioned day 3 running backs just like kind of like losing value when you talk about Tyler Algier. I mean, James Robinson just cut the other day. Was it yesterday?
That was
cut
crazy.
from the Patriots, signed like a little $2 million contract. Went to the Jets last year, didn't do anything. But like after that rookie year, you were like, yo, James Robinson is that guy. Well, fuck that. The Jags go out and draft Travis Etienne, and you see what happens with those guys. So.
Yeah, and if you listen to me, I told you to sell James Robinson because, like, this is what happens with those day 3 guys. Unfortunately, these teams don't have much, they don't have much cost associated to them. So they're, unfortunately, the word is expendable. Especially what happened with him is because they got a new coaching staff also. So it's like, okay, now you have a brand new regime who has nothing to do with drafting you, and you were an undrafted free agent, despite how well you did in round 1. And I actually did a little bit of a study where I looked at all rookie running backs who were day 3 rookie running backs or undrafted, who ended up having a great rookie year, over 1,000 yards rushing, etc. More than 50% of those running backs were replaced the next year with either a highly drafted running back or a free agent.
Holy
So
fuck.
Dameon Pierce is okay
For now. And, you know, I was selling him because of the fact that he had a great year. However, chances were that the Texans might have, you know, drafted a running back to replace him on day 2. It didn't happen, which is great for him. You know, I think he can have a big year this year. They did sign Devin Singletary, though, so, you know, he could have a little bit of an impact in terms of what that workload split looks like.
But Devin Singletary hasn't been able to do anything in a better offense.
Agreed.
So what is to say that he's going to come in and take carries away from Dameon Pierce, who's a more talented
I think that's a
running
great point. And I think that, you know, I'm not, in terms of like me being in on Dameon Pierce this year, I don't think that is playing a huge impact on that. Yeah. I would agree.
You talked about players that are overvalued this year, guys who you would think like are really good, like who, you know, the average fan would think is really good that they might take. But what are some players that the average fantasy player might think to take that you would say to avoid at all costs?
Oh, man. Guys who I'm just avoiding overall. You know, I mentioned Breece Hall already. You know, Javonte Williams, I think, at all costs.
Really?
This year.
Because the injury?
I don't even know how much he's going to play.
It's a multi-ligament injury. This is a similar injury that J.K. Dobbins had last year, where it's ACL plus MCL plus a whole bunch of shit that I can't pronounce, right? So
some CL.
It's some CL, exactly. And it's one of those situations where, you know, if he was healthy this year with Sean Payton, like he would be an RB1 for me, right? A top 12 running back for me, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But now they bring in Samaje Perine, somebody who I'm targeting in drafts just because he's a very good pass catcher. We know that Sean Payton's offenses. So before Drew Brees retired, Sean Payton's offenses, you know, in terms of the backfield, they have produced like the overall RB1 or the overall RB2 in terms of like entire backfield for like 15 straight years.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Pay attention to Samaje. Pay attention to Samaje Perine.
Roll it back. Roll it back.
And we're talking before Alvin Kamara. We're talking like, you know, before Mark Ingram.
Before Mark Ingram, too?
We're talking about all the.
So what you're saying?
Thomas,
So
Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush.
Sean Payton offenses produce the RB1 a majority of the time.
Yeah, not the RB1. I'm talking about
His
like a
backfield would
RB1.
be.
the collective backfield is the overall RB1 backfield or RB2 backfield.
That is
Interesting. So
lit.
target anyone in Denver.
Yeah, and multiple running backs can succeed. At
Who
once.
else is there? Samaje.
It's just it's basically him and Samaje.
I was going to say, because like Ingram and Kamara are both like serviceable fantasy starts every week.
And there was one year where they were both top 12 running backs in the same
That's
year,
crazy,
which never happens.
You would think they'd go after Dalvin, but they said they're out of those
Look up
sweepstakes.
Denver
did they
Broncos
say
running
that?
back room.
Yeah.
That's
They
interesting.
said they were out on Dalvin.
If Dalvin goes there, he's the RB1. Like obviously, he's like he'll be the guy.
Tony Jones.
Who?
Another guy from
Orleans.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony Jones. He was
Tyler Beatty, Mizzou.
Jones.
Very productive
Mizzou.
college running back.
Yeah, he was great. He was great for us, man.
You're clearly very high on Bijan Robinson.
Yes.
What other rookies aside from Bijan Robinson do you think people need to take in their fantasy drafts?
So, you know, if you're going, we can go position by position. I'll start with a quarterback. I think if you're going to draft any rookie quarterback, it has to be Anthony Richardson or none of them.
Yeah.
Because C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young can be very good NFL quarterbacks. Even in the rookie year, they can have a decent years, but they're not going to move the needle in terms of fantasy. They can be okay. Like, just go ahead and draft Kirk Cousins then, you know what I mean? Or just draft Daniel Jones or one of these other veterans who are going to put up the numbers. You know they're going to put up the numbers, right? With Richardson, though, he has like top 5 upside because of the rushing ability, because of the fact that, you know, he could take a lot of those goal line looks away from Jonathan Taylor. He has that type of Cam Newton upside, right?
Yeah.
And he has low key. He has some weapons. Like he has Michael Pittman. He has your boy Josh Downs. You know, Alec Pierce is there too. So like, you know, he has a couple guys who can get it done. In terms of running back, like I think Jahmyr Gibbs. I mentioned him earlier. I like David Montgomery, but I really like Jahmyr Gibbs because of the upside, right? He's going in the 4th round right now. So
That's
that's
crazy.
like in a PPR
round.
in a PPR league.
It's
like,
gonna kick up, I guess.
he has the upside, even if he doesn't get anywhere close to the majority of rushing attempts. It doesn't matter. Like if he has the upside of like 70, 80 catches this year,
the touches
which he
will be
does.
there.
Like yeah, exactly. And you know he has the playmaking and explosive ability to do his thing this year, regardless.
He's exactly what they wanted DeAndre Swift to be when they drafted
Is
him.
there,
100%.
is there an argument that
I know exactly where you're going with this.
if we're talking dynasty, we're talking long term, that Jahmyr is a better draft pick than Bijan?
I don't think so. I think
Because
Bijan
Bijan's
has,
also a good receiver.
right. He's a very good receiver. He's not as good as Jahmyr Gibbs,
Right.
right? However, he has the there aren't that many running backs who come into the league and just have the ability to be an every down bell cow, and he's that guy. And that's just a rare opportunity. So I don't think there's a situation because you got to remember with Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a small running back.
Yeah.
there might
199.
never be an opportunity for him to get goal line carries in the league.
Yeah,
it's very possible.
That's fucking blows.
So that's really the main difference between those.
Would
two
you
guys.
say that by mentioning Jahmyr Gibbs, is it very similar to Breece Hall of last year? When Breece Hall was going, if you were drafting early, he was kind of going in that 4th round as well.
100%. I was all over Brees last year.
Yeah.
And he was completely mispriced. It made no sense to me. It's like this dude is coming in. People were worried about Michael Carter, but Michael Carter, guess what? Another day 3 running back. He was drafted in the 4th round.
Expendable.
So expendable. You know what's going to happen there, right? If you drafted Brees Hall, a guy who was a very well touted prospect coming out. You got to, and his combine was ridiculous athlete, good production.
Yeah.
He was going to be the guy, and him going in the 4th round didn't make any sense. Jahmyr Gibbs, 11th or 12th overall pick in the
12th, I think.
12.
in the NFL draft. Like when that happens, you got to go after it. They have a plan for you, and they already had a plan for DeAndre Swift. He's just taking that role.
All right, what about the other positions? Wide receiver, tight end, I think, is where it also gets interesting.
Yeah.
Dying to
So
see tight
a
end.
wide receiver, like, okay, look, I'm looking at Jordan Addison, right? He's being drafted as a wide receiver 36. Is that a value? Like, I'm not sure. Like, maybe he becomes a wide receiver 3, and I think I like Jordan Addison, but I think he's being drafted like kind of like at, you know,
At a ceiling?
maybe close to it. Zay Flowers at the wide receiver 46. I like that because he has a chance of being the wide receiver 1 for the Ravens this year in a pass-heavy offense.
Yeah.
I think Mark Andrews is the guy, and then after that, it could be Zay Flowers.
Similar to the Chiefs with Travis Kelce. Kind of.
Similar, but I think the Ravens have better wide receivers, right? And so
facts.
there is a opportunity for one of these wide receivers to really emerge. If Rashad Bateman wasn't coming off a foot injury, I would think that he would be the clear alpha wide receiver 1 there. I think he's being super underrated. He's another buy in Dynasty, by the way. Maybe not this year because he's coming off that foot injury, that Liz Frank injury, but going into 2024, I think he would be the guy. Lamar Jackson just called him his wide receiver 1. Like, and that's
Who,
that should be
Bateman
the case.
or Zay?
Bateman.
No faith
But
in
Bateman
OBJ
looked
comeback
great
year.
before he got hurt.
Dude, OBJ is coming off 2 ACL
Yeah.
injuries,
Yeah, no, I
man.
know.
Like, you know, he's. I think
What's
he's
he
going to
30?
contribute.
What's he?
I-
31, 30? OBJ.
Yeah,
too?
yeah, exactly.
OBJ,
He's
yeah.
getting up
But
there
they
in
don't
age.
need him to be like him
But
as
they
your
don't
wide
need to.
receiver 3,
Yeah,
or
throw him in
even
a
you could say your
slot.
weapon 4
Yes.
behind like
That's
Mark
a
Andrews,
take.
Bateman, and Zay
Have
is
him run some fucking slants and shit.
unbelievable.
He
Yeah,
is the perfect wide receiver.
I'm
3
so
for
excited for the Ravens to go 16-1.
dude, they're going to be a good team, man. I can't wait. Lamar Jackson has a lot of haters, and I cannot wait until he kills it this year.
All right. What about tight end? Rookie tight end.
That's what I need to know.
I would say don't draft any of them. That's what I would say as a rookie, because rarely do rookie tight ends make a huge impact in year 1. Last year, you had Greg Dulcich, right, out of the Broncos. Like, you know, he had a couple good games, but he wasn't really a difference maker.
No.
Kyle Pitts was a unicorn coming out. That's
He
different.
was terrible.
You know, but
His
in
first-
year 1, like, he did okay. He was okay,
Yeah.
but he didn't score a lot of touchdowns, right? That was the knock on him. So Dalton Kincaid might be my favorite rookie. If I had to guess, if I had to like make a prediction of who's going to be the best rookie tight end this year, I would guess Kincaid, because the Bills desperately need a wide receiver too right now. They don't have one.
Yeah.
It's Stephon Diggs and bust, right? So Kincaid could get some opportunity this year. But Dawson Knox is still there. He still has a big contract, still going to be involved. Is he going to run enough routes to make a difference? I don't know, right? Same thing with Sam Laporta. He'll be my next one up. I like him, but, you know, the Lions have Jahmyr Gibbs. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams is going to come back week 7. So is there enough room for him? So I would just avoid all the rookie tight ends. There are enough enough veteran tight ends that you can draft late, where, you know, could make a difference for you.
What about long term?
Long term, I have Kincaid and Michael Mayer as my like 1A, 1B. I kind of like Mayer more, to be honest with you, but because he has just a larger body of work, and then Laporta would be number 3, and then everyone else I don't really care.
Dude, if Kincaid can be Josh Allen's guy for the future,
He'd be
like
that red zone
when you
number
tie a
2,
guy like
yeah.
that, like you talk about Kelsey with Mahomes,
Yeah.
or even like a Mark Andrews with Lamar. If Josh Allen finally has his guy, I know he has Knox there, but Knox is good for what he is.
Yeah.
But what I get reminded of, even though it is, like, I agree with you from a tight end perspective, but if we think back to 2 years ago, Dawson Knox wasn't a rookie, but he didn't play much, and then he ended up becoming a very serviceable fantasy tight end because he scored touchdowns.
Serviceable is the key, and the thing is, there are so many serviceable tight ends.
Exactly. So that's where I go. Which rookie would be serviceable? Because you're not expecting them to have
Sure.
1,000 yards, but if you can score touchdowns, you can get them late.
I would have to go Kincaid.
Yeah.
The thing with Michael Mayer is that they still have Austin Hooper there, so there could be a little bit of a split. You know, he's a quote unquote good veteran, so like I don't see him getting the route participation that you need. But Kincaid can potentially come on the field and just like start running a route on almost every drop back.
What about Cheeto?
Oh, you can go. Yeah.
What about Cheeto? Big guy in Tennessee? Cheeto?
Yeah,
Cheeto?
I mean, yeah, I know who you're talking. So the thing
Diggadell?
with him is
I
like
like Cheetos.
I like him from an opportunity perspective. I think that there are a lot of late round tight ends. I think he's one of them. I would say it's like guys like him, guys like Greg Dulcich, paired with Sean Payton now, which I really like. And Sean Payton was just raving about him a couple weeks ago. So that's good to see. There's a bunch of late round tight ends, I think. I have a list of those guys like on the website. Like you can kind of go through to see what exactly those targets are. Another one is the latest tight end that I'm willing to take is Jake Ferguson on the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, they drafted a tight end, but like I don't think he's that good to be honest with you. So like, and he's already hurt too. I think Ferguson is a young athletic tight end, Schoonmaker, who But Ferguson's a young athletic tight end who showed some flashes last year when
he
Dalton
did.
Schultz was hurt. So I think now with Schultz out of the way, like I think people are sleeping on Ferguson a little bit.
I'm curious because, like, as a draft strategy, like since we're talking tight ends, for some reason I always find myself like wanting to take. Obviously, Kelsey's a unicorn, but like taking the Andrews or Kittle or Wall or something like that because I feel like there's not that many high producing tight ends in fantasy. Is it actually that important, or can you just get away with having one of those mid-tier guys and the rest of your team's?
That's a great question. I think it is important. So there aren't that many positions, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, where you can get such a big positional advantage other than tight end. So if you have Kelsey, the positional advantage you get, it actually increases your win percentage on a weekly basis by like 20%.
Sure, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kelsey's a whole different
Which is,
animal,
well,
right?
and that's why, because the delta between the tight end 1 and the tight end 2 is so big.
Crazy. Yeah.
So that advantage gives you a statistical higher chance of winning every single week.
That's crazy,
especially if your opponent that week has like a waiver wire tight end
yeah.
who might not do anything.
So
And if you can get a waiver wire flex guy that you can play for half the damn season too, it doesn't even
Yeah,
matter.
and then also like wide receiver, like you can pick up a wide receiver off the waiver wire a lot of weeks
Easy,
and just
yeah.
throw him into your wide receiver 3 spot. You'll be good.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So are you willing to pay? I know, and I feel like this argument comes in every single year because it's like Kelsey's going to fall off at some point.
I know.
But knowing how many elite wide receivers there are, knowing how there are other guys that you could pick up, are you willing to pay the price? Or I guess what is that price look like that you're willing to pay for Travis Kelce in that first round?
I think end of the first round makes sense.
Okay.
I think I'm okay with that. But you said it, right? Like he's getting older. He's like almost 34 years old, but like he's not showing that much of a dip right now. And it definitely falls off a cliff at some point. Like, and you won't even know like when it happens. But with Kelsey, I kind of feel like I'm just going to ride it until the wheels fall off. You know?
You kind of have to. What about those other tight ends, like that second tier, like the next
like the
three
Mark
guys?
Andrews and those guys. I think Mark
Kittle,
Andrews.
yeah.
The reason why I have been out on Mark Andrews over the last couple of years, but I'm kind of back in on him because his price is a little bit lower. You can get him at the end of the third round right now. It's not bad, and they're going into a pass first offense where you don't have to worry about Mark Andrews he has to produce on like 6 to 7 targets a game. Is there a chance that he can leap above that and get 9 to 10 targets a game? Like that would mean the world, right? And then he has the opportunity to potentially be the tight end 1 this year if Kelsey takes a little bit of a dip.
If he takes a dip, yeah.
Interesting. Question. We already did some rankings, but we always talk about our top 5 quarterbacks from our opinion.
Sure.
But who are your top 5 quarterbacks for fantasy this year?
For
No
fantasy?
explanation. Just run through them.
Okay. I'm going to go number 1. I'm going to go Jalen Hurts.
Oh, wow.
Number 2, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Number 3, Patrick Mahomes. Number 4, Josh Allen. Excuse me. And number 5,
Justin Fields.
Justin Fields.
Yeah, baby, let's go.
Thank
But
you.
value, but you're because value
You love-
baked into that? No.
No. This is who I think is going to be who's going to average the most points per game. Wow.
Because rushing quarterbacks are just more valuable.
Why so low
100%.
why so low on Josh though?
Or Pat.
So it's not that I think Josh will do the same shit he's been doing. I just think these other guys will just do better.
Yeah.
Like Jalen Hurts has the rushing ability. He's going to be rushing in touchdowns
Yeah,
because
the touchdowns.
He is their goal line.
they didn't change the tush rule, right? So he's going to keep getting pushed in, and he has the weapons, and he's going to put up the yardage and the passing touchdowns too. So like he has everything. Like
that's facts.
he is like the perfect fantasy quarterback. And if you drafted him last year, you got him at a major value, obviously. But this year, you're going to have to pay up. But I think it's worth it.
That's the only list Patrick Mahomes isn't one on. I'm serious.
I see. Okay.
I'm curious
Yeah.
from a fantasy perspective, though. Going back, I feel like, and I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, fantasy shifting, the strategy. The price now on these quarterbacks are in that, I think Pat starts going at the early third, like that 2-3 turn. Are you willing to pay the price on these quarterbacks super early, or would you rather wait for the Deshaun Watsons, the Trevor Lawrences, the Dax guys that could bounce back? What's the best, route to drafting a quarterback this year in fantasy?
So, every league is different, but I think that Jalen Hurts has such a potential positional advantage that I'm willing to take him in the 4th round. I have always been a late round quarterback guy, but at the same time, there hasn't been quarterbacks available to me that I think that can make a huge positional difference. He's one of those guys. Outside of Jalen Hurts, I don't really want to draft the quarterback early. Patrick Mahomes in the 4th round, I'm out. Just because he doesn't have the rushing ability, right? Like, will he do his thing? Of course, he always does. But like, what if Kelsey? I can't even make any excuses for Patrick Mahomes because he lost Tyreek Hill. He keeps losing. He lost Juju already. He keeps losing receivers and he keeps proving me wrong, right? So like, whatever. I'm not going to talk shit about Patrick Mahomes anymore. I can't.
bad
But
practice.
Lamar Jackson, I think he's a decent value end of the 5th round. I think Justin Fields going around that same range once Lamar's off the board. I'm cool with that also because I think Justin Fields, like, I don't think he's like this. Like, he's not going to be an amazing, quarterback in terms of passing the football. But he did get DJ Moore. He could, we saw what he did last year. He finished as a top 5 quarterback in points per game last year without DJ Moore, without the offense being super balanced. If that happens this year, he has a chance of finishing as like a top 2-3 fantasy quarterback, even without the passing stats to go with it.
No Josh.
He's talking
not even mentioning Josh in these, really.
Yeah,
Josh was 4.
I
Do the same
here's
shit.
the thing with Josh. Like, you got to understand too is like he's getting a little bit older, right? And are they going to, limit his rushing attempts and rushing ability? Like, are they going to limit that a little bit at the goal line? Like, they brought in, Damian Harris. They brought in some big backs, right? And are they going to be limiting him at the goal line now? He's had, 7-8 touchdowns a year over the past several years. Is that going to go down? But I think he's still going to do his thing. I wish they drafted another. If DeAndre Hopkins goes there, for example, let's say hypothetically DeAndre Hopkins lands in Buffalo.
Goodness.
I might put Josh Allen over Mahomes. I think I can put him at 3.
For
instead of
fantasy.
For fantasy,
Obviously, for fantasy.
yeah, I think so.
You got to clarify. I don't.
100%. I
a
mean,
fancy
I
episode,
think
bro.
I think my actual NFL quarterback rankings will be drastically different. Like, Justin Fields wouldn't be top 5, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, CJ
Stroud
Stroud
put him
put him in his top 5. We got picked up by like NFL and ESPN because we interviewed CJ Stroud at the draft the day before the draft,
Okay.
and he gave his top 5 quarterbacks
And he had
in
Justin
no
Fields in
order,
there.
And he had
which all the
Justin
media
he
companies.
had Justin Fields in top 5.
Yeah, but they went to OSU
but it's
together,
yeah,
like
yeah,
they're
yeah.
boys.
He,
Like
he literally backed up
he
Justin
threw him
Fields.
in there at the
Makes
end. He
sense.
threw him in there at the end. But whatever. We got to wrap in a few minutes, but curious, what's your hottest take for this year's fantasy season?
I think Tony Pollard's going to finish as the RB1.
Whoa!
Let's go!
The overall
And the
RB1.
Cowboys Super Bowl or what?
Is that a fantasy
damn.
question?
That was a fantasy take. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be anywhere close, to be honest with you.
Fuck yeah.
But I think Pollard's going to have a ridiculous year this year. I'm sorry, man.
You went from such a high to
Hey, it's all good because you know what? Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields, top 3 quarterbacks. Tony Pollard, I have him as well
in
in my
Dynasty.
Yeah, so we're good. We're good. He talked nice to me today. He can say a little shit about the Cowboys.
You were
It's all
too
good.
high. I had to bring you lower. a
That's
little bit.
facts. That's facts.
That's great.
Nah, I think Pollard has. I like Pollard this year a lot. Real quickly on the Pollard note, though, the Cowboys offense, like, I mean, last year you had two guys, right? You had CD and Pollard, really, that were the guys to have. Like, you're not really banking on anybody else there. What does Brandon Cooks change in that offense?
I think he's being undervalued. He's one of those guys like similar. In that,
He's always undervalued.
He's always undervalued. But
Yeah.
this year, I think like for some reason, listen, he had a bad year at Texas. He was like faking. I'm sorry, in Houston, he was faking an injury all year long. I'm gonna say that he was because he just didn't want to play. Every single week he wasn't practicing. He's like,
can't
oh,
blame
am I
him.
gonna play? Am I not? I don't want to play. So and then he wouldn't play. So I think it's gonna be completely different. He's on a contender now. He's on a contender now. So I think that good offense, good quarterback. And I think that they truly needed a real wide receiver too. Will Michael Gallup ever do anything since his rookie year? I don't know. We'll see. But I think he's the clear wide receiver 2 there. And I think he can end up being a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 for fantasy. And he's being drafted, a lot lower than that right now.
But Tom, before you wrap, I just have to ask this question for Jack.
I
Jack
got a
and
couple more too.
Oh, you got a couple more?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, Dynasty.
This is Dynasty. So
Fuck
we're,
yeah.
we're big on the Dynasty train. Love it. And obviously, I think it's gained a lot of popularity over the years. And it kind of makes it a year-round sport now, right? Because he's a freak, so he's doing a bunch of redraft mock drafts.
He is a fucking
Most
freak.
people aren't doing that. But like when you're playing Dynasty, now you're talking about like rookie drafts and you're invested
You
in the
gotta
draft.
scout.
So when Charbonnet, I mean, we were at the draft. We were in Kansas City.
Shambles
Charbonnet
when
got
he went
drafted
to
with the
fucking
Seahawks,
Seattle.
bro. I was in shambles. I'm like, what are we doing?
Right.
I still drafted him, but whatever. But when do you think Dynasty is, if ever, will overtake the kind of redraft in popularity? Because I think, more people are gonna, as more people start playing it, you're kind of looking at it as in like, why would I play redraft if I got my Dynasty team?
Right.
So do you think that ever will happen? And if so, when?
I don't think it's ever going to happen. And I love Dynasty. It's one of my favorite formats. However, you got to look at like shorter attention spans, right? Like
Definitely.
you got daily fantasy, right?
Yeah.
You got like all these things where like you can put a lineup in the morning on Sunday, and then you'll know the results by like 4 p.m., right?
Right.
And that's like, I think that's the challenge. I think more people are going to be tuning out. I think Dynasty is for the fantasy nerds like us.
Yeah.
And I think it's for us, people who are really into it, it's like probably one of the most rewarding. Like if you can build a team over a couple of years and finally
Facts,
win that
dude.
championship, like that's super rewarding. But not everyone wants that multi-year commitment. I think
Makes sense.
a lot of people want to tune out, right? A lot of like significant others and like wives and stuff like that. Like,
Facts.
like you got to like get off the couch on Sundays. Like we got to do some stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think like that also plays into it. Like, I think Dynasty is going to get more popular, but also there's so many other formats, sports gambling, all these other things that are going to be taking attention away from fantasy. Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's just instant gratification.
There's something to be said about like having different players to root for every year too, right? Instead of just the same guys.
But there's also on the other side of that is just like
following.
being
Like,
able
that
to
is
ride
your
a guy
team.
for years.
Yeah.
There's something about that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the dynasty hype until like I like always joke with Felipe. I'm like, I'm on his board of advisors for his dynasty team, which great championship last year, by the way, for us. I can't wait till my ring comes in. Size 9. But like, I did my dynasty first dynasty startup draft this year. I was like, oh, this is fucking sick. Like I'm in.
So
love
fun, bro.
this.
It's fun.
It's a good time.
It's really fun. I think redraft for the masses, I think is probably going to remain like the most played part of fantasy for the most part.
All right, let's go draft.
Last question that I just thought of. It's not written down. We are super biased to all of our teams, and our fans and listeners know that. So I'm curious if there's an underrated player on each of our teams that you could give us that would be worth drafting.
Ooh, I like that. That's a
So
good question.
he's a
What about
Cowboys
underrated
fan.
and overrated?
Sure, underrated and overrated. He's a Cowboys fan, Dolphins fan, Niners fan, Giants fan.
All right.
So-
Sounds good.
Go around the horn.
And we're talking fantasy, right?
Fantasy-wise, a
Fantasy.
player on each of our fandom teams that you would suggest taking that might be underrated.
Okay. Let's start Cowboys. We're going to go Brandon Cooks, underrated. Overrated? Oh, man.
Nobody, bro. We're different.
I would go, if I had to pick one, I would probably go Dak because he's like a replaceable low-end QB1. So, yeah, sure. I'll go Dak. Dolphins?
I know what this answer is.
Okay. Overrated, I'm going to go...
Tyreek.
I'm going to go Devon A-Chain, I would say.
Ooh.
Going right to the court.
But he's not being drafted super high. But if I had to pick, because I can't pick those other guys, right?
Yeah, you can't.
It's either him or Tua, right, for fantasy. But I think Tua's going to be fine. He's also kind of replaceable, but A-Chain's the easy answer. Underrated, I think Tyreek Hill because he's being drafted as the wide receiver 4 or 5, but he has almost an equal chance of being the overall wide receiver 1 this year with Kupp and with Jefferson, right? So he has that opportunity this year, and he's going for 2,000 this year, right?
I like that you briefly just mentioned Kupp in that conversation because I think everyone forgot about him.
No, I hear you. He should be at least a top 3 ranked wide receiver this year for sure.
Bet. Hell yeah.
And what was your team again?
Niners.
All right, so underrated Brandon Ayuk. That's easy.
Fuck yeah.
I'm gonna throw Trey Lance in there too, by the way, just to spice it up a little bit.
We got a couple of us. We got a couple. Let's go.
Overrated. I would go Deebo Samuel probably.
Sure.
As overrated, I'll throw Brock Purdy in there too. But I think
Brock Purdy fantasy wise got to be terrible.
dude,
right?
unbelievable. Deebo Samuel, I think he's obviously he thought he had a bad year last year, but I think this year. I think Ayuk could take a step forward. There's so many weapons there too, right?
Yeah.
You got
Yeah,
Kittle,
so
you got
many.
McCaffrey. It's too many.
There's only one ball.
100%. So I'm gonna go Debo. He's being drafted pretty high right now.
Thanks, bro.
Good
That was a good take.
And what was the other team again?
The Giants.
Okay, overrated. Oh man, this is. So they drafted this wide receiver, Jalen Hyatt.
Jalen Hyatt.
Felipe, you've been talking about this shit.
Super
been.
super overrated.
You think he's overrated?
He's straight line.
100%. He is a one-trick pony. Listen, I hate talking shit about players. This is not what I'm doing here. I'm just saying that
He is.
he's a wide receiver who is going to need some development, route running, all of it. So one-trick pony. I don't even know if he's going to be on the field that much this year. To be honest with you,
That's tough to hear.
it is. And if I'm a Giants
hear
fan,
one-trick
but I'll say this: third round, good value from an NFL perspective because you have a guy who's going to stretch the field. That makes an impact whether you get the ball or not. Okay. Anyway,
Opens up Darren.
Nobody
Darren
wants to be a
Waller,
one-trick
guys are gonna
pony.
benefit.
underrated Darren Waller. I think underrated. Darren Waller could lead this team, and I think he will lead the team in targets this year. So he has a chance, as long as he doesn't get hurt, he has a chance of finishing as like a top 3 tight end.
It's a
I
big
would say
if.
it's probably Kelsey, Mark Andrews, and it could be Waller at 3.
What about Daniel Jones? Is he worth drafting in fantasy?
I think so. I think he has like 7 slot wide receivers to throw to.
They are all slot wide receivers.
Yeah,
Great.
so many guys. And
David Sills
but
the
at the end of the
fifth.
day, he has Waller now. He's in a decent system. I think Barkley is going to be a little bit healthier this year. I think he's going to be in a decent spot. He has that sneaky rushing ability also. So I think from a fantasy perspective, he has a high ceiling on a week-to-week basis too, because like he can rush for 50 yards and then run
And
in
a touchdown. Yeah.
So and then like throw in maybe 1 or 2 also.
Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden he has a 35-point game.
Yeah.
So that's why like he's worth drafting, even if his floor isn't that high.
God damn.
Sick.
I like it.
Off the
Wow,
cuff.
man.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
good. That was good.
I want to do it again.
Adam, you got to up your game. You want to start over?
I just want to do it again. I want to do fantasy
Come on,
so
H
much.
ain't overrated though. That's tough, bro.
Yeah, because
So,
everyone else,
we'll-
who else are you going to pick on the Dolphins?
It's true.
We'll definitely have to do another one as
yeah.
the season approaches.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna need more insight. Keep taking notes. Make sure my friends don't
This was
listen.
awesome.
But for
I
us,
love
thanks for coming on, man. This is a great
Yeah,
time.
appreciate you, bro.
Fun, man.
Dude,
Appreciate you guys.
I'm
It's fun.
so
Great.
juiced for the
Adam-
season now. Oh my
Adam
god.
has been dying for just fantasy episode, just
Yeah.
full on.
Which
Yep.
we need, bro. Everybody needs.
I like looked down at the clock and I was like 11:30. Like, God damn.
Never too early to start prepping for your fantasy team. So
It's
Have
actually
100
too
mock
late.
drafts.
It's actually
You
too
don't have
late.
100 mock drafts before June 13th. I don't know what the fuck
You
you're
know
doing.
what? Let's just bang one out. Let's just bang
you
the
wanna
first
plug
one.
anything?
Rip one right now. What you got? Go from the 3 spot.
hold on.
Just Upper Hand Fantasy on Instagram,
Yeah.
Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. That's how you can find me. That's
Awesome,
pretty much
bro.
it.
Go check him out. Go
Adam's
check
got fantasy pros up
It's
right
just
now.
taking a long time to load.
All right. Well, Faraz, thanks again.
appreciate you, bro.
Thanks for listening to Caps Off Podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
What do you think of some of those fantasy takes? You agree with them? You disagree? Also, make sure to check out Faraz at Upper Hand Fantasy on all social platforms. And for any betting advice, go to thegameday.com. You're going to find it all.